Next, we're going to hear from Janie Dolan, who is arriving by Zoom. There she is. She completed a master's degree in social work and has been associated for more than 10 years with the fight against violence against women and structural violence. Janie did street intervention work with Indigenous women in Monterrey, Mexico. Part of her approach included integrating response-based practice, an approach based on social justice and upholding the dignity of the women victims of violence. Ms. Dolan has worked as research assistant to Dr. Catherine Richardson for over 6 years. She is currently coordinator of the FRIDAA project in Quebec. Welcome, Janie.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you. I'm sorry I'm not able to be in person with you, but yeah, I'm really happy to be there and have a place. First of all, also want to thank Kathy, who's in the room. She has taught me so much, and it's thanks to her also we have been working on that project named FRIDAA. We also have in the attendees online other people that have been working on that project. And for me, it's really important to say that FRIDAA is not me. It's the people who's working around that project, but I will be the voice presenting that project today. First of all, oh, maybe I can diaporama. Okay. So maybe I can start talking about FRIDAA, who we are, what is FRIDAA, what is the origin, history, methodology, and challenges that we encounter. Just to say, I'm sorry for my English, I will do my best. I speak more French, so please feel free to stop me if it's not clear. Also, as I say, FRIDAA, it's a lot of people. FRIDAA is, first of all, a collective of women and two-spirit people who work as a community. We are Indigenous two-spirit people and allies, and we work toward creating more safety and for women and their children, and for the men who also need healing. Just to talk a little bit about myself, and my partner in that work. I'm a settler. My origin are Irish. I've been raised and born in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, on the territory of Kanien'kehá:ka. And also my colleague who's not there with me, but she's there in the room, in our town. She's Kanien'kehá:ka and Chilean, and we have been working really closely together on that work. First, the work of FRIDAA is really about, it's a community-based participatory research with the goal of documenting and sharing practices, approaches in the context of healing from and eliminating violence throughout the territory. It came from the idea that a lot of the community, and for I will just go back. First of all, this project, I named some of the people working on that project who are the core of this project, but there's also the territory, that so-called Quebec. So FRIDAA is taking place in Quebec, one of the provinces of Canada, and there is 11 nations in Quebec. So it really focused on that territory, so-called Quebec. So I was talking about the fact FRIDAA has the objective of documenting those approaches. It came from the idea when we talk about violence that we need first to highlight, to put forward what is already being done in the communities, what workers already know and are doing. We want to highlight those practices, those approaches, and to recognize them and to honor them. It comes from the first of all of this idea that we need better social responses for safety and respect of dignity of women, their children, and communities too. FRIDAA came from starting, it's a long journey. It's a really long journey. It came from 2018, from a gathering that was organized by Native women of Quebec. And and from this gathering, workers asked, we need to know more about our approaches. A lot of the communities in Quebec, they don't really know what our other communities are doing around stopping violence. Most of all, some communities speak more French, and others speak more English, more their indigenous language also. So the idea was to bring everybody together and to design a project that will give back immediately to people. We don't want to do a research where we're taking the information and some researcher will decide what's important or not and giving back to people, but we want to make sure people instantly, directly get the information and share. So that was the idea. That's why in 2020, we decided to put in place a community. So we're 8 women and 2 spirit people that have been working on that gathering. And as I say, it was a really struggle of working with government and saying, this is research. What we're doing is research. We're going to gather 50% from the different nations during a week, and we're going to heal together, to support together, to talk about our approaches. And all of those part of this gathering is research and is knowledge, and it's important. It's not only the part of interviews that are research. And also, so we had planned this gathering. Unfortunately, it was in April 2020, and we know what happened in that time. So we had to find other ways. We stopped for a while, and then people from different communities and from the community was like, this work is important. We need to do this work, and we need to share our approaches. So that's why last week we did finally our gathering, but it was an online gathering. It's part of the project. Come back a little bit more on the objective of FRIDAA. We got this idea of, as I say, explore or document these approaches, but we have also this idea of having a space where we can stop as worker and reflect and analyze what we are already doing. Sometimes there's so much going on and people don't have a place to just stop and think about what they're already doing. Learn and share about different contexts, reality. We talk about urban community, a more remote community. So learn about all those experiences. Most of all, FRIDAA is about, if we want to work toward stopping healing, we need to create link between each other to feed a network, because a lot of workers told us, but it's draining, it's so hard that work and feel alone. And a lot of those workers or people who's working toward stopping violence are not remunerated, they are not paid for their work, or they are not recognized because they are volunteer in their community, or they are elder, or they are sharing, but they are not recognized. So it takes all a network to support that work. Also, as I say, the objective of FRIDAA is at the end of the day to respond and act, to respond for Indigenous community and families. We use different methodology. Was really important for us, as I say, to use a methodology that is not linear, like this idea of it takes time. As you see, it's a lot of year and it's a lot of came back. We had an idea of what we should do, but every time we say, okay, is it really the good way we should do it? Is it the best way for people to share? And we go back, and that's how we start, by interviewing some workers in different contexts. Those interviews guide us for the big themes of the gathering, as I will show you later. We also but the committee is also like part of all the step of this work. So the 10 women and 2 spirit people that have been involved all over those years. And it still now, we did the gathering online, but we're still looking at, okay, how we are going to give back. So we have sometimes idea in our mind, but this is always changing. And I think this is a little bit of like struggling, but that's how it makes sense. First, the individual interview, I wanted to give you an idea, some quote of those interview, and giving you an idea of why FRIDAA has been important. A person say it was precisely a kind of place where we can share our experiences or our approaches in terms of violence. You know, how we fight violence, how we accompany people in violence, and how I myself do to protect myself from violence. So that's why FRIDAA makes sense for a lot of us. One other person was also saying around dignity, that has been a team really strong in our work. It's, you know what, a lot of time that I approach my client, and it's funny because, you know, I have that Western education, right? I have and I love it, Concordia education, but whenever I did those counseling classes and those kind of thing, there was also that line that was wrong. They're your client, you don't have relationship with them. You live that, they're totally separate. I'm like, that's not how we work as Indigenous people. Yes, I am in a worker position with a client, but you know what? We're family, we're community, we're sister, we're cousin. And sometimes it's like, that's okay, where they are really, where they really are your cousin out there. But it's more of, again, it's about building that connection, about building that trust, about building that relationship. And women, I find encouraging them to accept themselves and see themselves as beautiful with beauty. Their dignity, they hold it, you respect it. That's in a nutshell. And not seeing someone as a number or case or file, you know. So when I speak to someone else, I'm not taking this, sorry, I can say, else I'm not taking this and put it into a file and saying, that's it, put it in a drawer. No, you're a person, you're a woman to woman, we're talking. And I think this quote is so important because FRIDAA Works is also highlighting how working toward eliminating violence and also recognizing the way we have been working, some people have been working in like more colonial way, and to put more emphasis and recognize that work of doing different and building relationship, true relationship. Gathering, the initial gathering, what we were really proud of, it's how we often talk about mobilization and how sometimes it could be difficult, but in that case, we saw how important it is to be together because people responded and a lot of people wanted to be there. As First Nation, as Métis, as Inuit, as non-Indigenous, it showed us how important it is. I will talk to you a little bit more now about how we came up to the online gathering and the 4 topics we came up with. The 4 topics were, first of all, the most important thing is, if we want to work towards stopping violence and alienating from violence, we need to know where to go. We need to have a model, we need to know, and that's where we talk about values. A lot of community were like, we need to find it back. What do we mean by being in a couple, by being in a family? What is our views on family and couple? We need to start there first. After that, it was also who we are accompanying. When we talk about stopping violence is also working with men, two-spirit, women, youth, children, families, communities. So it's not how we bring all those people into the conversation. The other topic also we have been working on is justice, because how we can heal from violence is also a question of justice. And also the last topic was more about healing and how we see the individual healing, but also the community healing. I will talk to you about some examples that we had throughout this gathering. The first one was the, I will show you some video, but first, this one is in French because it was last week, so sorry we didn't have time to prepare all the videos still, but this one is an example of Alice Cléry. She is the director of Atikamekw Authority Intervention System. This system is really interesting because as we talked a little bit earlier in that presentation, in the case of the Atikamekw people, they were able to take back, I think in 2018, the protection of their kid. In Québec, there is the protection of youth, and they take care of the case in terms of protection of youth. But it's a colonial system, and as we talked earlier, there is a lot of violence through that systems. They were the first community to be able to claim it back, and they are the first community to be independent, and they can own their own case of youth protection. And what is really interesting about them, the first step, one of the first steps they did when they bring it back, they put in place two kind of work. They do a family, I can't say it in English, but meeting. So the way they work to not go into justice when we talk about violence, or to find out a way that really represent themselves. Because the first thing they say, just removing a kid from our community and seeing the dad and the mom or the whatever, the only two people, the responsible of the kid, it's not our way of seeing families. So what they did is they are bringing all the family together, all the people that are helpful to the family, and they are going into the land with them. And during 6 hours, 8 hours, 2 days, the time it takes, and the timing is really important. They take the time to discuss with the family, to have a ritual, and to bring the topic of violence, of the situation, with the family. But it's really the family who decide what teams, how they want to bring it, who they want to bring into that circle. It's also important to say that it's in Atikamekw, in their language, even if there is white settler workers into the case or helping the family, they are not going to do translation for those workers, because this is not the idea. The idea is really the family. And the children are in the center of that circle too. So it's a really different way, and this helps to keep the children and keep into the community. And when it's not possible into the family, they goes into other families, into the same communities. And it really helps the family to heal and to stop the cycle of violence too. And when we talk about values, they talk a lot about canoe, as you see the images, where they did a research with their own community about what it's like to be a family and a couple in our community. And they use the idea of the canoe, where the man is behind having a role to play, the woman is in front having a role to play, and the children also in the middle. And those values is the one that is guiding their own work into stopping and eliminating violence. We have also had also one of the panel was around what approach is helpful to prevent and eliminating violence. And one of the people involved was people from Pakotik, who's working more with Inuit women in Canada. And there is the Black Indigenous Harm Reduction Alliance that's really a collective here in Montreal where they're working with people in context of incarceration and also in street context. I want to show you a little part of the video where Sasha Simons is talking about her works and what is really important. I think it's important to her. I will just stop my share and share my sound at the same time. Okay, I think it's gonna work. Can you see my screen?
Hey, now we can.
You can see it? Okay, thank you.
Inflicted another police state perpetrator.
Sorry, I just want to.
I bring everything, learning how to build community with those who are around you, who you encounter in life, you know. So this is not exactly the question you asked, but I'm going to go there anyway. One of the questions that we had to think.
Indigenous people do what they need to do. So,
you know, I love that as
one of the questions that we had to think about in advance was about kind of like, how do you identify yourself personally? And I was thinking about that. So I'll say a little bit about that. My experience is a mixed race experience. I'm Black and Métis. My mother is also white. And besides me being a multiracial person as myself, like the story of my family is very multiracial, and is really bound up in like the histories of African descended people who escaped enslavement in the States and came to Canada to build new communities, all of the other people that they encountered and built community with along the way. And I always knew that I was Métis, but it wasn't until I came to Montreal and met people who encouraged me to look into that more and to start to understand myself in that way that I began to be able to build that community, right? So my Indigenous identity, first of all, I would describe as reconnecting in a big way. And I try to see that as like a privilege and a responsibility to be careful about which spaces I take up and which topics I speak on. But it's also like one of the superpowers that I have, I guess, like code switching, you know, to be able to bring solidarity between communities, to be able to identify with different communities and help them to understand each other, to be able to have the particular privilege from my life experience to both understand things about what it's like to be a queer person and a broke person and a person with different experiences of mental health issues and substance issues, but also I've been to university. I have a bachelor's of social work, and I can move between some of those different contexts in a way that not everybody can. So back to COVID and to street work. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that the interaction starts again every time. So every single time I go out for a walk, I try to be as prepared as I can. I bring everything that I think I might need or that somebody might want, but inevitably I don't know who exactly I'm going to encounter, and I don't know exactly what they're going to need. And I have to try to do my best in that situation to respond to what they're telling me and to listen to what they're telling me.
And that's very humbling too sometimes, but it's also resulted in some really amazing moments where I just brought something so random that was at my house, and then that was the exact thing that somebody needed, or I carried something around for months and months and that was the exact thing that somebody needed. Recently there was somebody, a woman who lives in the encampment that we support, whose partner was incarcerated, and she was talking to me about being really afraid because she was alone after a long time of being together and like kind of having the protection of living with a man. And I happened to have this whistle in my bag that Anna had given me to give to somebody else literally like 6 months before. And so I spoke with her and I gave that to her. I don't know whether that ended up helping her, you know, but in that moment I had something to offer that meant something to that person, that responded to what they needed. And so that's kind of like the biggest lesson of street work for me. I also try to, I try to just be in a mind space of being able to respond to what's actually happening in front of me and to just authentically build connections and do the best I can. And I think that people respond really well to that, and they really understand when I don't have what they need to, you know.
So I think that's Stasha, I've said it all, but it's about I think we want to highlight the superpower, as you say, the code switching. As she say, I think it's really important how she talks about connection, about having the good things at the good moment, but not knowing exactly what would be this thing, or being able to truly connect and being able to be comfortable in that idea of non-comfort, of not knowing what we can bring, either ourselves. So I will just finish on that. I know we're running on the time, but just want to finish a little bit on layers. Yeah. So we talked also around justice. I won't have the time to show you the second video that we wanted to show you. But one of the things that I want to bring to the conversation is the voice of Sherry Prenton around justice. Because we think of one of the big work around approaches when we talk about violence is the idea of justice, and I could share the video after if you want, but Sherry, who has been incarcerated for a lot of years, and she authorized to share the story, but she was talking about the fact that what is really justice? For her, she has been incarcerated for murder. She has been there at that moment. But she said the first experience I had with justice is non-justice. It's about the fact her mother went missing for 2 days. And when she appeared running from the forest, and she was run through by a car at that moment, and the police never investigated as a missing and murdered Indigenous woman. They just say it was a car accident. And so our first relation to justice system, to the colonial justice system, was non-justice. So today she's working on the street in Montreal. She's working around this idea. She believes in restorative justice, but she's bringing this idea of, can we really work with colonial system of justice to help that work? She said way better than me, but we're short on time, so I wish I could share you her voice. We had a lot of learning through FRIDAA. We still are in progress of how we're going to give back this information, or we're going to continue that work. It's a difficult word sometimes to bring all those different vision or realities and create good spaces for people to be able to share the works they're doing. Thank you to all. And thank you mostly to those people who has been working on FRIDAA.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all chatting with each other. Do we have a question from the virtual attendees that we want to start with? Did Maya speak to that? There's Maya. No? Okay. Okay. So Reagan has the mic. We're passing it around. We're beginning with Corinne.
OK. Allô, Janie, peux-tu m'entendre? Oui? OK. Alors, ma question, c'est au sujet de travailler dans le contexte de Montréal, au Québec. Est-ce qu'il y a des tensions ou des enjeux en ce qui concerne le français et l'anglais, les communautés autochtones qui vivent en français et qui vivent en anglais ou bien qui vivent dans les langues autochtones dans le domaine du partage des informations pour le réseau? So sorry for English speaker. I was asking her about the particular context of working in Quebec and in Montreal and around some of the language regulations and laws about things having to be in French. And I was curious if that had an impact on the way that the communities relate to one another or the knowledge translation activities that they have planned. Merci.
Well, thank you so much for that question. This is really, really a important question. Yes, it has an impact, really important impact, English and French. First of all, like there's really little spaces for different communities speaking, even Inuktitut or English or French to get together because of translation is so expensive, but also there is not so much spaces and it's really like separate. Also, it's really hard for people to get information in their languages. A lot of work is doing only in English or only in French, but not a lot is really bringing into the conversation different nation in different languages. So it has an impact. It has an impact on some also. There's a lot of tension around that, like some community having access to information, some information and other community that they don't have access to, even in a context as Montreal urban community. It's even where a lot of people they're from different community, even in that context, it's really hard to create a safer space to share and exchange knowledges with translation. So we don't have a solution now for that. That was a big deal for our gathering in person. But we're still trying to create. We have like some people who's doing like, because a lot of people in for example, in Nunavik, North Quebec, they are only speaking Inuktitut. So even that, like we want to bring everybody together, but this idea of not only doing translation, but it's people being able to share what they're living. So it's a really complicated situation, and we're still into reflecting on that. I don't know if it's answered, but it's where we are. Thank you.
I want to make sure I don't. Okay, great. Okay, great. Reagan's at the back, or who has the mic? Reagan has the microphone. Please just raise your hand or make eye contact with Reagan when you're ready. You don't have to say it in French. Yeah.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
I don't speak French that much anymore. Sorry.
That's okay.
But so I think it's interesting because we also brought up language, but in particular, pronouns was kind of our starting point. And I would argue generational gaps, or what appear to be generational gaps. Elders maybe not fully understanding or appreciating youth identifying as gender fluid, or the they them conversations. How, I guess, are you navigating that? Because I think that's also something that changes from door to door, tribe to tribe, language to language. But on top of that, I guess the lateral violence that can come out of these things. I think the intertribal politics is an underlying topic that hasn't come up at all this week so far. But I think when we address violence and we address gender realities, we can see those things start to unfold. So I'm not sure if in your experience or in terms of FRIDAA as a group, where that type of linguistic and colonial amplified other types of violence kind of have settled.
Well, thank you so much for the question. I'm obviously not like the best person to respond, but I will share what we have been working on as a collective and what are our thinking. That's obviously like there is some people identifying as two-spirit in our community, in our collective also, and working with a lot of elder of creating ceremonies for FRIDAA or around FRIDAA. We had a lot of this discussion because gender fluidity and two-spirit, sometimes it's complicated within some elders, some ceremonies too. So we're trying to bring that conversation of that violence to, of not recognizing two-spirit people in ceremonies, or having ceremonies only for women and only ceremonies for men, and working throughout that. Throughout FRIDAA, we try to bring out this conversation into the communities, and from one community to another, it's so different, but also from one elder to another. So that's one thing also, and we're talking a lot about, also Sasha was talking a lot about that, the person that you saw in the video, but the violence against LGBTQ member incarcerated too, and the work we need to do specifically toward this community and helping and sharing, because there is a lot of violence and a lot of murders. So it's absolutely conversation that we're bringing. It's not an easy conversation. We're bringing it also toward values and this idea of two-spirit people. Were really present before colonization. They were recognized, and that's also a violence of the colonial system to divide genders and not recognize all genders. So we're trying to bring the conversation throughout example of the work of the worker they are doing and how important it is. That's what I could answer for now, if it makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Janie. And thank you everyone for your wonderful questions for Janie.
Thank you for everything.